They were very worried about what Meghan would do to them. About they viewed her capacity for revenge as infinite. Certainly, my sources around the time of the bullying story felt that they were both bullies.
Developing today, the Sussex Survivors Club are very nervous to speak out even now, as the truth about Meghan Markle's bullying claims have finally been revealed in a fascinating interview with Valentine Low, he the author of Courtiers, and of course, the original journalist behind the claims of bullying in the British royal family. Now, Brittany, he sat down. Brittany is with us, by the way. She's editor, of course, of the Royal News Network. And Brittany, he has sat down for an in-depth interview with Kinsey Schofield, where he has revealed far more information about how this story came to pass in the first place. But let's just set it up, because, of course, this is such an important moment of modern royal history, because the way that Meghan treated staff and whether she was truly a bully behind the scenes, which I believe she was, is very, very imperative in terms of how history ends up viewing her time within the royal family. Because, of course, she wants to make out as if she was the one who was bullied. And there's a lot of fascinating stuff to emerge in this interview with Valentine Low, who sat down with Kinsey Schofield. But for me, what was probably most interesting is the fact that even now, members of the Sussex Survivors Club, and remember, I know some of these people personally too, are still terrified by Meghan, still feel emotionally beaten by her, and believe that her capacity for revenge is infinite. If you're enjoying what we're doing here on Outspoken, please consider joining our thriving community over on Substack, www.outspoken.live. You can sign up completely for free, but Substack is so important to me. It is a free speech platform. It protects me from big tech cancellation. Plus, you get to communicate directly with me. Head on over www.outspoken.live, enter your email address, and sign up today.
For both that Times piece and your book, were they nervous? Were they frightened?
Certainly for the Times piece, people were very nervous. I mean, I had to make quite complicated arrangements to talk to some people, and there was strong element of nervousness and worry, and they were still some of them were still in a very fragile state. I mean, and this is extraordinary, because it was 2.5 years later. It was 2.5 years after that memo was written, and they'd left the employ of the royal family, and they still were in a psychologically delicate state as a result of what happened to them at that time.
And a lot of these people, when they signed these agreements, which means maybe not some of the people that talk to you, but some of the people that leave, they tend to be asked to sign agreements that say they won't say anything about working in the royal household. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And so there are many people have asked me this before, and we've discussed this before, but I think it's worth mentioning because I know people will ask this again. Even if their NDAs were lifted, a lot of these people don't want to become the face of this drama. They don't want to be. They don't want to be doing the interview circuits. They have no desire to put themselves out there. So in case they ever were given permission to talk publicly, you have told me previously you doubt that they would. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think they are happy leading their new lives, doing whatever new job it is they do. And they don't want the media on their doorstep. They don't want to have this kind of target on them. And certainly at the time I was writing that story, they were very worried about what Meghan would do to them. About they viewed her capacity for revenge as infinite.
I mean, Brittany, fascinating insight, right? Because these people did put it all on the line to speak to Valentine Low. And I think they should be credited for doing so, because they wanted a true version of royal history.
Exactly. They really wanted people to know who Meghan is, because what Meghan has done her entire time in public life is basically try to spin a narrative that makes her seem saintly, perfect, what have you. And they knew the Oprah Winfrey interview was going to go down, and they were like, we want to share our piece, but we're so terrified of her. And terrified of her capacity for revenge, I think is so true. I mean, just consider how Meghan has treated those who should be nearest and dearest to her, her own father, her husband's family. How she's treated them just shows you how she would treat people who she considers well beneath her. And that is staff. And I'm sure she would work her darndest to try to get them to lose their job or anything like that if they spoke publicly with their name in their face. And I understand as well the media pressure would probably also prevent some of them from wanting to face this publicly just to avoid the scrutiny. And the Sussex squad as well. I mean, I don't blame any of them at all for wanting to avoid that group because they're some of the nastiest people on the internet. And they do it all for their benefactor, who is Meghan Markle.
Very true. Now, there's another part of this interview which is hugely significant. And again, I just want to give some context to it, Brittany, because firstly, Valentine Low, he's a reporter, he's a journalist, he's not a commentator, okay? So some people think that what he's saying is quite dry. But the reason that it's very significant is that actually he doesn't have skin in the game in this, right? Like, he was never team Meghan and Harry or team William and Catherine. He was all just about reporting the truth. And Kinsey Schofield puts to him a theory that she's been propagating for a bit. And I really like Kinsey, and she has broken amazing stories over the years. But this one always surprised me because it was this, I think, propaganda for Prince Harry, which was that, oh no, terrible things never went on when he was there. Meghan always behaved really well when Harry was there because Harry's just so lovely. Now, that never matches up with my reporting, Brittany, because remember, I was dealing with these people at the time of them being bullied by Meghan and Harry, and absolutely Harry was bullying them. I know male staff members, Brittany, who were pretty much left in tears by Harry because of the revolting way that he would sometimes act towards them. And I want you to have a look at what Valentine Low says about this, because he's not doubting Kinsey's reporting, because of course his reporting is based on the time in the royal family. But he is very clear, and he uses the words that in his view, based on his reporting, Prince Harry is a bully too.
Harry happened to walk in the room, he stepped in and would defend the employee. Does that surprise you, or have you heard something similar?
It's not a pattern of behaviour I'm familiar with.
Really?
Put it like that. I mean, certainly my sources around the time of the bullying story felt that they were both bullies.
Okay.
So Harry being the peacemaker and the defender, that's a new one on me. But I'm sure it's true.
That's so interesting, because the reason why I was confident in that is because the Hollywood Reporter, they don't say that he defends anybody, but they say he's the friendlier of the two, and that she kind of wears the pants, but he is Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky.
Yeah.
And the sweet, well, you were you've been a royal reporter forever. What was your opinion of Prince Harry prior to this marriage? Did he seem like a lighthearted individual? And had you ever heard he was a bully before this?
Never heard he was a bully before this. He was, what I've always said about Harry is he was someone without a filter. He just lets it all out.
He was unfiltered?
Harry Unfiltered. It's a new podcast series coming soon.
Right here, there's these two.
Which is both his good point and his bad point. It's his great virtue because he is very emotionally honest. He says what he thinks. He doesn't stop himself, and he could be very amusing and very lively. But also, he sometimes doesn't stop to think.
Yeah, it could sometimes get him in trouble.
Brittany, to me, that was very illuminating because, again, this is a guy who is just reporting. He's not bringing his personal view into this. And his view very clearly, no. There are both bullies here. Now, of course, Meghan's worse than him. Like, no one's surprised by that. But that's like saying, oh, Goebbels was a good guy because he wasn't as bad as Hitler.
That is a great point. And what you got to think of as well, when you actually think about the Hollywood Reporter piece, I believe what it said, in addition to the fact that Harry was a little bit easier to get along with, is that he enables her. And he goes along with the bullying because he enables her in part now, for sure. But I think even then, we know mantra of Harry before the wedding was what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. He was screaming at Angela Kelly, allegedly. He was yelling at various staff members. And I think it comes from the fact that Meghan really stirred up, I think, the worst qualities in him. Was he sort of easy to get along with, affable before meeting Meghan? Yeah. But I think because of how she spun him and twisted him up, and yes, these factors of him of being a bully, I think in some ways always existed. All of it was exacerbated by Meghan. He was so desperate to keep her, so desperate to keep her happy that he allowed her, enabled her to bring out his absolute worst qualities. And that is definitely 100% Harry's problem. He should have seen how Meghan was treating people, and he should have been the first person to say, Meghan, we don't do that here. It should not have taken his grandmother to tell her, no, we don't do that. Harry enabled Meghan every step of the way. He inflated her ego. He allowed her to grow out of control. And he was perfectly willing to go along with all of this. And so it's on Harry. Yes, Meghan's behavior was equally, if not more, deplorable. But Harry was the one who should have stood in the gap and kind of tried to amend Meghan's behavior. And he just indulged her. And that's how we got the dictator in heels that the Hollywood Reporter mentioned, because Meghan's still on her high and still, I think, probably ever angrier that things aren't going the way she wants. So I'm sure things are getting pretty bad behind the scenes in the land of Sussex. And I think that's why Harry's like, I'm going to go to Angola and get as far away from you as humanly possible.
Yes, exactly. And turn my phone off and there's no way you can contact me. Oh, and it's not because of me choosing to, Meghan. It's because there's no internet. Rubbish. But you are completely right to talk about Angela Kelly because, of course, we saw her there. She was so close to the late Queen. She drew attention to the late Queen in terms of how Meghan and Harry were behaving. But I do think when it comes to Harry specifically, there had just been such a great PR job, a good spin job that had been done in terms of how he appeared publicly for a very long time. That wasn't how he was viewed behind the scenes within the royal family, because actually he was cantankerous, he was difficult, but while he was being looked after by the establishment, by the men in the grey suits who he now hates so much, actually they protected him, and a lot of his terrible behaviour had been protected. And I'm talking about, by the way, before he was even with Meghan Markle. Now, I was also really interested to hear how Valentine Low spoke about how the bullying story was revealed in the first place. And also the fact, Brittany, that after its publication, despite loads of threats from Harry and Meghan, oh, we're going to take legal action, we're going to sue your ass to eternity, nothing, radio silence. And I was very interested because I have great sympathy. I mean, when you're breaking a story of this level of significance involving the royal family, you do have lots of pressure. It was the same thing for me with Megxit. I had an editor who was just so worried that, you know, if I got this wrong, we would both lose our jobs. So Valentine Low painted a very interesting story, actually, which she'd never told before, about exactly what he had to do to get the story printed in the first place. But first, don't eat breakfast until you learn about caloric bypass. Your breakfast is setting you up for the entire day to either gain weight or lose it. The term breakfast literally means to break your fast that you started the night before. About 4 hours after you eat dinner, your body switches from the nutrients we get from food to the stored glycogen we have in our bodies. Once glycogen stores are depleted, typically after 8 to 12 hours of fasting, the body shifts to burning fat for energy. Fatty acids are released from fat stores, where they are converted into ketone bodies through a process called ketogenesis. Then, when you eat breakfast in the morning, the body starts the cycle again. This is where the caloric bypass comes into play. Dr. Gundry, a heart surgeon in California, learned that if you break your nightly fast with something called MCTs or medium-chain triglycerides, you can actually keep burning fat throughout the day and use it for energy. But there are specific types of food that contain these MCTs. Using this breakfast breakthrough, he was able to lose 70 pounds just through diet, and he did this in his 60s. You can find out all about it and his exact method by going to thehealthyfat.com/outspoken. That's thehealthyfat.com/outspoken, or just click on the link in the description box below. It is important to remember that everyone's body processes fat differently, and it all depends on your unique metabolic type. Which is why in the video he released for my viewers, he talks all about it. It's quite fascinating. It might change the way you think about your health. So go to thehealthyfat.com/outspoken or click on the link in the description box below. But now, back to the show.
Extent that we were originally going to run the story on a Saturday, and I thought we were ready to go,
Yeah.
and then the editor at the last minute said it wasn't quite there, which was a moment of great difficulty. Moment of difficulty for me. I was quite upset about that. Also, a difficulty for my sources, who were kind of all ready for the story to come out. And then, for it to be delayed, they started wondering, would the story come out at all?
Now, this is crucial because we're in the lead up to the Oprah Winfrey interview with Harry and Meghan, and we don't know what this interview includes. I mean, I think we're all watching it with our jaws on the floor when it actually lands. But we do know that Harry and Meghan are critical of the British royal family. And was that one of the reasons why your sources wanted to get ahead of this interview? Because they wanted, I don't want to say to defend the British royal family, but maybe they did want to defend the British royal family.
No, it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that if the story had come out after the Oprah interview, it would have just looked like sour grapes. It'd be lost in the noise. But Meghan would come across as this heroine, this person who'd been victimized, the royal family, who'd been treated terribly badly. And the whole narrative would be about what she and Harry said about their experiences with the royal family. And it would just get lost. No one would really care. And the important thing was to get it out beforehand so people would listen to their story, and that they would look at what they claimed in Oprah in that light.
And is it okay to ask you what changes were made between that Saturday and when it actually is published? What were the tweaks or the...
It wasn't so much tweaks as additional verification.
Oh.
Just making sure that everything was watertight. And we saw that because before publication, we put the allegations to Harry and Meghan, and we got a very, very long letter from their lawyers. And then sometime later, we got another slightly less long letter from their lawyers. But basically, being very, very feisty, very strong,
Basically saying, like, watch your back or we'll come
watch
after
out,
you.
yeah, exactly. And then we published, and after that, we didn't hear a word from them.
Radio silence. That speaks volumes.
Not a word, Brittany. Not a word. And that does speak volumes because these were such serious claims. And do you remember they pulled out the lawyer from Shillings, and she went on the British Bashing Corporation and she said, they've never bullied anyone. But seriously, go to court then. Because you know what would be so good, Brittany, if there was a court case over this? I think at that point, the Sussex Survivors Club would be able to speak out. Of course, it would call into question so many issues, for example, surrounding NDAs and the Official Secrets Act. But of course, Harry and Meghan don't want that because there would be so many of them who could give evidence about the bullying. So instead, they made all of these pitiful threats, and then sure, they spoke out in the media, but to the Times and to Valentine Low, not a word.
No, it was so telling, Dan, that they did not pursue any legal action because we know how much Harry likes to use the legal system and Meghan as well to bash their enemies. And they just couldn't in this instance. They didn't have a leg to stand on. And I like what Valentine Low talked about as well, which is so incredibly true, is that the timing of this release was so incredibly important because people would be more likely to dismiss the bullying allegations if they came out after Meghan's interview with Oprah. It was critical for them to come out before because then it sort of reset the entire Oprah Winfrey interview. And as a watcher, you could, if you read the Times piece, which I did, you could take that information and sort of place it on what Harry and Meghan were telling. And because they had already given the interview, they couldn't go back and directly address those allegations either. So, obviously, as a journalist, you have to make sure that everything is verified to protect you for legal reasons. But I think the timing here, Valentine Low was so right. It had to come out before the Oprah Winfrey interview. We probably wouldn't be even seeing these allegations until years later if he couldn't get those out before then. And it was a way for his sources as well to feel a bit more protected and vindicated as Harry and Meghan went on their vitriolic campaign. So this was so incredibly critical, but the silence from Harry and Meghan just verified that the claims were 100% correct, which for me, I didn't really question, but it was fascinating reading Valentine's Low piece for the first time. It was fascinating.
Yeah, it really was. And of course, Brittany, there is still discussion amongst royal circles. Is there a way that the Sussex Survivors Club could speak out? Is there something they could do working within the parameters of the Official Secrets Act and the NDAs? And obviously, that's something Tom Power's been talking about. Now, Kinsey puts that to Valentine Low. They also discuss here Spare 2.0. And what's interesting is Valentine makes the point that, yes, there's been a threat of a second book, but actually Harry just cut stuff that was boring. Like, he hasn't actually held back all of this really great stuff because there would be another book if he had. But of course, there's also the prospect of Meghan's diary as well. So watch this.
Is this something that will come out eventually, or is this going to remain a mystery? Because I talked to Tom Bauer yesterday, who's like, they could still talk. There's still more they could share. The palace always has to be weary of that Harry and Meghan, there's spare number 2. Harry tells the Telegraph, I believe, he ripped out 400 pages of the book. Meghan says she's found her diary at Frogmore. She tells the Cut she didn't sign an NDA. And even if they did release more, there were factual errors in Harry's book. There are his version of the truth that we always have to comprehend. So we can't even guarantee that would be the truth. Do you think we'll ever know the truth?
I think pretty much broadly we know the truth, but there are some aspects which we don't know the truth. There are several people who haven't talked, some very crucial people who haven't talked, and I don't think ever will talk. And one of the, because I don't really believe Harry and Meghan have got anything more significant to say, because that would imply they were holding back, and I kind of don't believe they're holding back. If Harry ripped out 400 pages of this book, it's only because they were boring, Harry.
Yeah.
And you were repeating yourself.
Yeah. Also, I don't care about you getting in fights with your brother. I get in fights with my brothers all the time, not physical fights, but I fight with my brothers all the time. It's human nature, and I don't think there's anything salacious about you and your brother having some sort of verbal spat about whatever it is.
But I think the really big story we haven't got to the bottom of is exactly what happened when Meghan allegedly went to the palace and said, she was struggling and asked for help, supposedly, and help was unforthcoming. I think it's a very complicated picture. I think Meghan's version is possibly disingenuous, but it's also based on something, and exactly what happened and why would be really interesting to find out. But the other reason why we won't ever get to the truth is, at what point have you got to the truth? Because I know Kate hasn't spoken, but if you take the tears over the bridesmaids' dresses story, she made me cry. No, she made me cry. It's like,
Yeah, and that is the issue. We will never quite know for sure, Brittany, certainly when it comes to the crying, because we'll never hear it from Catherine. But look, my team, Brittany, have been to work, and this is what I want to say about another Harry or Meghan book. Spare us.
Yes, I don't think, I mean, I've always thought Meghan will probably write a book, and sort of the danger you could say is that when it comes to Meghan, we know she is fully willing to tell tall tales. We know she is flat out willing to, in my opinion, lie when it suits her. And so the danger with her future book is that, yeah, they might have shared everything that was, you could argue, somewhat truthful before already. But now we might get into the territory of exaggerating to the point of outright lies that damage the monarchy, or at least make it difficult even further, because some of this stuff you probably can't really argue against. It would be incredibly difficult. And so that's, I think, the danger with Meghan now, because she has such a terrible track record with the truth. I think the only people who would truly believe her are her Uber stans. But Meghan definitely, I think, has an abundance of willingness to spin tall tales when it suits her. And I think for a memoir, she's more than willing to do that, especially if it makes her a good chunk of change. And I think she'd be more willing to go into the whole alleged racism allegations and those sorts of things if she could legally get away with it. Although Omid Scobie had to pull that back from his book, probably for legal reasons, which didn't get to one of the copies. But, anyways, it was just, there's a lot of danger there. Harry, obviously, I think, has nothing else to offer. He's done everything. Even his passion project, Heart of Invictus, failed. Polo flopped. Nobody really wants to hear about those things, unfortunately, because Harry himself is a terrible messenger, and so is Meghan. But will they investigate this path to make money? Of course they will. They desperately need it. They need tens of millions of dollars to fund their lifestyle at this point.
Kinsey Schofield also asked Valentine Low how he felt about the fact that all of these years on, the American publications and the woke publications were starting to back up his reporting. The most interesting, Brittany, really is Vanity Fair, because of course they started as propagandists, didn't they, with the wild about Harry cover, and then moved to the American Hustle, which was very damning, but again, fair. Do you know what I mean? They'd spoken to people from both sides. They didn't actually go in with an agenda, but the revelations that emerged from that from that magazine article were horrible, because they included the fact that Meghan is shopping this post-divorce book around publishers. But Valentine Low's take on the Vanity Fair reporting, very interesting. Watch this.
My feelings on reading it, a bit of me feels validated, but actually I didn't need to feel validated,
Right.
because I already knew that what I said was right and that people
It's
believed
not
it.
just that, though, but you fired warning shots. Behave. Change the way you weren't saying that, but if I get called out on bad behavior, obviously I'm going to try to change my bad behavior because I don't want to be called out again.
Yeah.
And it felt like you put it out there and you said, these people were devastated and they left their roles. Some people grow up dreaming of working for the British royal family. It's my understanding that you don't make a lot of money. You're doing this. You're doing this because you want to serve the royal family. It looks great on a resume. It only looks great on a resume if you stay a significant amount of time, because everybody questions somebody that leaves after a year or 2 years or less. So when you're doing this, you feel like you've won the lottery, and this is something that your parents can be proud of and your grandparents are bragging about. It's hard to leave the British royal family.
Yeah, and some people do leave quite quickly because they're in junior jobs and there's a churn and all that. But yeah, I mean, these people who left earlier, they left for a good reason.
And they left heartbroken.
Yeah.
So did you feel at all when you read the Vanity Fair piece how unfortunate that things haven't improved?
Yes, I mean, because for things to improve, though, you have to listen. And I don't think Meghan listens. I don't think she hears criticism. That's why she's so difficult to work for, because she doesn't hear advice she doesn't want to hear. She doesn't hear advice she doesn't like. So if I write a piece and she doesn't like it, I'm just the evil British media.
But isn't that so true, Brittany? Like, she had an opportunity to turn things around, and for her to be able to keep going with her narrative that this was just the evil British media and this was just racist within the royal family. But as soon as her behavior started repeating in California, in Hollywood, in Montecito, then actually we, as in the British media, British commentators who'd been saying this for all of these years, we could no longer be ignored.
Exactly. And what Meghan was trying to do that whole time is try to tell the world, oh, no, the British media, it's like, it's just them, it's just them. But once the American media started reporting on it, especially when it started with Hollywood Reporter, and it was such a short piece, they just said, hey, we've got this report, she's a dictator and he's awful to work for, and these sorts of things. And then the Vanity Fair longer piece, it just reiterated what the British press had been talking about for so many years. And it's something Meghan can't escape from. And the only reason any of these stories exist is because of Meghan Markle and her deplorable behavior. She could have changed, she could have adjusted as needed for a particular situation. She did not have to repeat the same bad patterns of behavior. But Meghan just didn't seem to care and was fully willing to continue her, I would argue, abusive tendencies towards staff, even after being outed basically by the British press, because she had spun a narrative where, oh, the British press is bad. You can't believe anything they're telling you. Well, now we know that no, that's not the case. In fact, the British press is usually pretty accurate when it comes to Harry and Meghan. So she defeats herself every single step of the way. And all she has to do, the simplest thing she has to do, is just be nice to her staff. And she just can't seem to do it. And it's just so easy and yet so difficult for Meghan.
Because she is Meghan. That is the problem.
Exactly.
And when you're dealing with the world's nastiest narcissist, actually, she can't change. That is the problem. She can try. She might change for a very short period of time. She might be very nice to staff members, Brittany. We often hear this when they first come in and they receive the charm factor. But eventually, just like with all of our friends, eventually, slowly, the mask slips. And then that's why this reporting has been so fascinating. But I think it's really good to dig into that with you, Brittany, because, of course, this was such an important part of royal history. And we've got to get to the truth. And we've got to get to the truth navigating through a world, as I know all too well, which means journalists, reporters, commentators can be easily put down and slapped down because we can't get those on the record sources, because it would literally be illegal for us to do that. And so people have to remember that when they're looking at this reporting, and when people are saying, oh, but these are just off the record sources, we can't name these people because they would face jail. That's the ludicrous situation that we're talking about when you're dealing with the Official Secrets Act in the United Kingdom. So I think that's been really important, Brittany. Thank you so much. And of course, if you do want much more royal analysis, you must sign up to Brittany's brilliant Royal News Network channel and our Substack as well, because at www.outspoken.live, you get first access to the Royal Uncancelled After Show Monday to Friday, no advertising whatsoever. You get it either live or on demand and before anyone else. Substack's such an important platform as well. It's free speech focused. It protects me from lawfare. So your support means the world. Please do sign up. www.outspoken.live.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.